Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining Exergy Energy's battery versus backup generator. This is the third in our webinar series of 8 different topics. The first one was an overview of how to be green, how to be resilient, how to save money. Last week, our webinar was how to get a free backup generator, basically how to use a backup generator intelligently and actually make money. Today, we're going to talk about batteries versus backup generators. The market, the industry is all abuzz about batteries, and we see articles every day about declining battery costs, new projects, and things like that. So we wanted to address that issue, and again, does it make sense for you? So before we start, a quick shout out to our sponsors. I really appreciate their support. Thank you to Cummins, one of the top backup generator manufacturers in the world. Pencat Corporation, who we've worked with for many years. Nobody is better at critical power systems. That's power quality, backup, resiliency. Hitachi and their support for our customers with capital availability. The RPG Energy Group, who we've had a number of projects together, and Energy Storage Development Partners. Just want to mention that we've got 2 distinguished guests today, John Rodriguez from Cummins and Chet Lyons from Energy Storage Development Partners. Many of you might know Chet. He is a sought after speaker at battery conferences and storage conferences. Just a quick couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so we have put you on mute. Therefore, if you have a question, and please, we like questions, please use the chat box, send us the questions. Chat box is being monitored. Don't use the Q&A function. We're monitoring the chat box for questions. So thank you so much. Quick introduction to Exergy. What do we do? Well, it's pretty simple. We are a simple and easy to use platform. Think of this as a marketplace, kind of like Amazon. We're a one-stop shop for municipalities and businesses that want to be green, resilient, and save money. When I say green, I mean 100% green, 100% resilient, and save typically 10 to 15%. We do it all for you, and to be totally candid, we'll do it cheaper than you can do it yourself. But the purpose of this webinar series is we explain what we do, how we do it for you do-it-yourselfers. If you really wanted to do it yourself, we teach you how to do it. Today, we're going to take this discussion of battery versus backup generator in 3 parts. And yes, number 1 is somewhat scary, statistics. We got to really figure out essentially how much time do we need to back up. Then the economics, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about solar plus battery as well. Now, why is this important? And I've just put this quote up there. The 5-year annual average of outages has doubled every 5 years, which means that the current 5-year annual is 4 times higher than what it was 15 years ago. We have an aging grid infrastructure. We have a number of, just changes, extreme weather events. So if you need to be resilient, if you need to operate when the grid is down, you need to take action now. Now, believe me, my inbox was full when I said, let's do battery versus backup generators. Tons of people wrote to me and said, you can't do that. They're just too different. It's an apples to oranges comparison. Backup generators can do so many different things. They are the Swiss Army knife of energy. I'm not going to disagree in total, but like a Swiss Army knife, you can only use one tool at a time. And what we're going to discuss today is that tool as backup for our resiliency. Remember, the goal of our webinar series is be green, be resilient, and save money. So we're going to focus on being resilient. Now, what I try to do is boil something down to the easiest concept to understand, to be able to compare things. And I sort of sat back and I came up with this one, which is a battery is like a bucket of water and a backup generator is like a fire hydrant. The bucket of water is fine if you've got a small fire, or if you have multiple small fires, but they're widely spaced out so you have time to refill the bucket. But if you've got a big fire, a single bucket is not going to do you a whole lot of good. A backup generator, like a fire hydrant, is basically connected to almost an infinite source of energy, in this case, being natural gas. So I use this analogy because I think it is the closest thing in the concept of how to bring these together. So the question now comes, how many buckets do you need? Okay, so what I'm displaying here is from the Energy Information Administration, and this is the grid outages across all types of utilities and grids and everything else. And what you see is, like, why are we bothering to talk about backup generators? They don't happen very often, and when they do, you're not down that long. If you notice over there under all utility types, even with major events, your average downtime is only about 4.2 hours. So, like, why are we bothering? Well, the reason is that these statistics are put together specifically to compare grids, or to compare this grid or this ISO against another one. They're absolutely useless statistics from the perspective of us when we're trying to plan for resiliency. The averages don't really tell the story. Grid reliability statistics are designed to compare reliability. But what they do is it's an average. So they take the total outage time and then they divide by the total number of customers in the grid, including those that didn't suffer an outage, okay? Now that's fine statistic if you're comparing grids, but not if you're planning resiliency for a company. Let me give you an example. Last year there was an outage in PJM. It was 300,000 people, right? I read that, I thought, wow, that's really a lot of people. Yes, but PJM has 65 million customers. 300,000 people represent only 0.4% of the customer base. During an outage, only a very small percentage of customers actually suffer an outage. Probably in recent history, the most devastating outage was Superstorm Sandy. And then only 7% of PJM customers suffered an outage. On average, I hate to use average yet again, less than 5% of customers experience an outage when an outage occurs, right? It's not a widespread thing upon the grid. So to get the numbers relevant to us, we need to take that average outage and we got to divide it by the number of people that actually, the percentage of people that actually have an outage. So we could either take the outage number and divide it by, and I'm using 5% here, which is really, really conservative, 5%, when you remember that 300,000 was only 0.4%, to get a realistic number. So the relevant average is not 4.2 hours, but 20 times that. 84 hours is a number that we got to consider. Now, super sorry for the second time. Little bit more statistics here. That 84 hours that we've calculated is still an average. It's the average of the outage. We've adjusted for the non-outage customer number, but now we need to adjust for the distribution of outage time. Remember, an average is the 50% probability. So if you planned on 84 hours, you would only have a 50% chance of being able to ride through that outage to the end because it's the average. Now, and I'm totally honest here, I don't have really good statistic, but if we assume that the outage time is normally distributed, its mean is 84 hours, we estimate a standard deviation of 15 hours. So if you want to be 99% confident that you can handle an outage, you need to plan on an outage lasting 114 hours or nearly 5 days. Okay, is this like unrealistic? Am I just, like making numbers up? Let's take a look at Superstorm Sandy again. This is the total elapsed time from the beginning of outage to the last outage that was restored. So for PJM, for Superstorm Sandy, that last customer, and it could unfortunately have been you or I, was 31 days out of power. New York, 12 days, ISO 7 days. So when I say, hey, customers have had outages longer than 5 days, that 5 days is probably a pretty good number to base on. So again, in our conceptual basis, we've got buckets, we've got a hydrant. How many buckets do you need? If we're going to use a battery for 99% reliability for 114 hours, you need 114 buckets. So now we have to ask ourselves, how much does a bucket cost? And the reason I used bucket is because you basically buy batteries like a bucket. You buy them individually, and they're usually priced on what's known as dollars per kilowatt hour stored. And at this point, Chet Lyons, best battery guy that I know, Chet, I get super confused here. When I go to the marketplace, I see prices all over the map. Just on this is an NREL, I believe, report here. $895 for a battery, $380 for a battery. Help me and our attendees understand why these numbers are so widespread, and then what is relevant to us. Chet, can you help me out, please?
Yeah, I'll certainly try. So the $895 value that you're looking at is a very high power to energy ratio battery. So it's meant to operate for just a little while, but at very, very high power. And they're designed and manufactured differently. So that's why you pay a lot more for that, is it can really handle a tremendous power surge. As you kind of go from right to left and you get to a long duration battery, a battery that would say discharge evenly over a 4-hour period, you're paying less per kilowatt hour of installed capacity, discharge capacity. So that's, that's one reason why there's a lot of variance in it. A couple of other reasons why there's a lot of variance is just procurement leverage. So if you don't do this every day, your leverage as a buyer with these different manufacturers is not going to be very good, and you're simply going to pay a lot more on that side. Another big reason for differences in cost is the first cost versus the warranty cost. These manufacturers sometimes pack a lot of money into the annual warranty amounts. So you've got to look at both the first cost and those ongoing costs all on that side. I'd say the final difference is kind of understanding what exactly are the design requirements for the system involved. And what typically happens is everybody puts their stamp on it, and you wind up with something that winds up being overly conservative. Well, that can inflate the price too. So that's a little bit of an overview of why there's such a wide variance in these costs.
Well, unfortunately, Chet, I gotta I gotta pick a number here. I gotta make an analysis here. So I pulled this report, and again, I see like a wide range. If I look at, I don't know who NIPSCO is, it's between $320 and $800 or so. But I noticed that the lowest price that I saw, which seems to be from Lazard, was about $300 a kilowatt hour. And again, this is for the 4 hours, type of battery, et cetera. Is 300 a good number for me to sort of work with in this analysis?
You can certainly work with it without a doubt. I mean, I'm aware of a project right now that's almost exactly that amount. It's a very large project though. Today, if you were buying it today, you might pay a little bit more, but if a project is going to be, say, going in the ground next year, 300 could be a good number for you.
Great, Chet. Thanks. I really needed that expert input there. Shake your ground here. So let's take a look at the assumptions for our analysis. So on the battery, and I'm going to need your help again, Chet, here. We have a total efficiency of 90%, minimum charge level of 10%, a unit cost of $300, and this effective cost of $370. So what does this efficiency and minimum charge mean, Chet?
Well, the efficiency just refers to the energy losses incurred when you're charging the battery through the inverter, and then also in the other direction when you're discharging it. So the round trip efficiency is typically stated as 90%. Mm-hmm. That can actually be maybe a tad high on it, but 90% works for most of the lithium-ion manufacturers on that side. The minimum charge, I think this is a little cryptic to me, but it means that you can't really discharge it all the way on it. So you need to leave a little bit of energy in the tank, so to speak. Your unit cost per kilowatt hour installed is just the number that we agreed is an okay one to work with. The effective cost per kilowatt hour is, by the time you take into account the losses due to efficiency and the fact that you have to leave a little energy in the tank, you run that arithmetic and you wind up with effectively $370 per installed kilowatt hour of actual capacity that you can deliver.
Okay, thanks, Chet. And then on the generator side, fully installed paralleling generator, with natural gas hookups and everything else, is about $1,200 I shouldn't say kilowatt hour there. That doesn't make sense. I should just say kilowatt. Is that a good number, John?
Yeah, that's a good number.
Okay, so let's take a look at what this then means. So let's just start so we can actually see on the graph 24 hours. Now, we're starting off with a battery for a kilowatt hour being about 3.5 times cheaper than that natural gas generator. Or conversely, at about 3.5 hours, meaning you have to add 3.5 buckets together, you've come to the cost of the generator. Now, the cost of the generator remains flat at its $1,200 per kilowatt. But the battery cost, because it's a bucket, once you've dumped the water out, that bucket's kind of useless for you. You have to have 114 of these buckets. For 24 buckets, just one single day, the investment in the battery for this customer, which is a 1 megawatt load, is about $9 million to be able to handle one day. And what did we say we needed? To be 99% confident that no matter what happens, we could ride out this outage. That's 114 hours. The cost of the generator to handle that is still $1.2 million. The cost of batteries to do that is about $43 million. So I think, for me, the conclusion is pretty clear that a battery alone as a backup is probably not the best use of economics there. But how about battery and solar? Okay, I mean, the real change here is we had a bucket and we had a hydrant. The hydrant is essentially attached to an infinite source of water here. The bucket was just filled. Well, what if we couple that with solar so that the solar is essentially refilling the bucket every day? Doesn't solar turn a battery essentially into a fire hydrant? Yeah, it does, sort of, but it's a bit tricky. And again, I'm going to apologize. We're going to get a little wonky here. The first thing you need to understand, and we went through this in gory detail in the first webinar, is you need to understand what your load shape is. Because you need to understand how much energy you need to generate through the day, how much you need to store, since solar is only going to generate maybe 6 to 8 or 9 hours a day. So here are 3 different load profiles. We have the hotel, makes sense. You know, it's pretty flat during the day, and then, you know, the guests come at night and turn on their air conditioners. Commercial building opens up in the morning, you know, some people work late, off it goes. And we've got a water treatment plant, which is pretty flat. Now, I don't want to get too wonky and too statistically, so let's assume we're going to use the water treatment plant with a flat load for this analysis. It just makes life a whole lot easier. All right, how much solar do we need? All right, first thing to start with is the capacity factor for solar, sort of average in the United States, is about 20%, meaning that it's only generating at its capacity about 20% of the time. I mean, in the middle of the night, the solar's not doing anything for you. Your load, again, this is going to be a water treatment plant. Our load is 1 megawatt every single hour. So essentially, we've got 24 megawatt hours that we need to generate. So we need to generate 24 megawatt hours with solar that only has a 20% capacity factor. So the thing we need to do is take the size of the load, which is 1 megawatt, divide that by the capacity factor, or 20%, and that will tell us our solar size, which in this case needs to be 5 megawatts AC. Now, most solar is quoted in DC, so I take the average of the AC-DC ratios in the United States. So we need to put in about a 6 megawatt solar farm behind the meter in order to recharge our battery every day to be resilient for 24 hours. That requires about 20 acres of space, and the solar is going to cost about $6 million by the time you're done. I'm assuming $1 a watt here for a behind the meter, you know, C&I space. So it's getting kind of expensive, but it's a lot better than the $43 million for a battery. But are we there yet? So what size battery do I need if I am going to be using solar? So when we look at it, the battery is going to charge for about 9 hours a day. So this battery discharge is 24 minus 9 is 15 hours. So we've got a battery size that is about 15,000 kilowatt hours. And if you remember, it was $370 per kilowatt hour. We need 15,000 of those buckets, essentially. That's a battery cost of $5.5 million. If you add the solar onto that, it's almost 12 million. All right, again, super sorry. We still got more statistics and things like that. Solar isn't constant throughout the year. We need to plan on outages during the winter, right? We can't just decide to be resilient some of the time. We got to be resilient whenever the problem occurs. And it's just as likely to occur in the middle of the winter with, you know, a nor'easter, or you think about Superstorm Sandy. Solar production on average is about 40% down from its peak in the summertime. The numbers, when I said that capacity factor of 20%, that's the average over the year. So what we need to do is now we need to adjust the size of the solar to account for wintertime, less solar radiation. So we need to up the size of the solar from 6.2 megawatts now to 7.8 megawatts. That's an additional $1.5 million. Really sorry, some more statistics. I apologize. Our solar analysis, though, is still based on an average. That's the P50, 50% chance that the solar generation may be greater than that or maybe less than that. Now, solar over a year is pretty constant. You know, just think about it. The planet and the sun doesn't change its position radically, right? So solar tends, year to year, the variability in solar is only about 6%. But the variability gets extremely high the shorter the time period that you look. So in this case, we'd only be 50% confident in the middle of the winter that if an outage occurred, we'd be able to handle it. That's like flipping a coin. We want to get to 99%. What happens if the outage occurs when the weather is bad? Oh, and in case nobody noticed, the biggest reason for outages, 72%, is extreme weather events, and solar isn't going to be producing at that time. So what does solar actually look like? So on a fine day, it has this nice little lumpy thing and everything else. On a cloudy day, it's down maybe 50, 60%. On a rainy day, or call it a blizzard or something, the production can go down by as much as 80%. And you could have multiple days. We have an ongoing storm. We could have 3-4 days where the solar production is literally in the tank, right? It's down by 80%. So again, we want to be confident. I use 99%. I want to be 99% confident we're going to be able to handle any outage. We need to adjust something here. Now, there's two ways we can do this. We can either adjust the solar and make the solar larger so that it is producing that 6 megawatts we need even in the middle of a blizzard. And if you take those numbers, you need to have a solar size of about 39 megawatts, or roughly about 160 acres of solar panels behind the meter. The other way to do it is increase the battery size instead. And what you do is on the nice days, you store the energy, and then when the blizzard and things happen, you use it up. And given, again, statistics of solar radiation, and assuming you've got your 7.8 megawatt site, you could get away with a 57-hour battery for a mere $21 million. So you could become 99% confident of being able to deal with outages with solar and battery for $21 million. That is just the battery cost, all right? If you add the solar onto it, you're close to $30 million as compared to 1.2 million for the backup generator. So quick summary comparison: to be 99% confident of operating through an outage, if you had a natural gas generator, 1.25 million. Battery only, meaning you're going to store and then be able to literally run the battery for 114 hours. It's about 42 million. If you want to do battery plus storage, it's 21 million bucks just for the battery. That 21 does not include the cost of solar. And I ignored the cost of solar for the logic of, hey, you're generating electricity, you use it, you sell some of it, maybe it breaks even. It won't, but maybe it does. So that's kind of a startling comparison there. I mean, from battery to natural gas generator, we're talking almost a 40-fold increase in CapEx, or 20-fold increase, or 18-fold increase if you're using solar with it. So you have to ask yourself the question, is there a role for batteries? So answer, yes, there is a role for batteries. First one is, depending on your load shape, so if you're commercial or you're residential, you're kind of peaky, depending on your location, some outages may be a lot shorter. Remember, only a small percentage of the grid actually goes down. And you can get the statistics of what are the highest risk areas and how long they go down. So you could have a peaky load, like a commercial residential. You can have it in a nice, very safe location, and your risk tolerance. Do you want to be 99%? Are you good with 90%? Or are you good with 50%? Given those and given pricing of the energy and things like that, you can occasionally, potentially, get a battery to pencil in its role as a backup generator. If you're interested, next week we have a webinar on how to get a free backup generator. How to get a free battery. And this goes through the value stacking. It was essentially if we value that Swiss Army knife. But the greatest use of a battery is what we refer to as ride-through, that handles the load until the generator is ready. So think of this as many organizations, if the power goes out and it comes back on in a minute or two, nobody really cares. I mean, I'm a grocery store maybe or something like that. The freezer goes down for a minute, nothing bad is going to happen. It could be all kinds of things. And if it comes back fairly quickly, no harm, no foul. In some instances, however, that's not true, and you really need to be able to ride through the load. Now, for most people, that's usually their computers and control systems. And what you do there is and we've all done this, UPSs, backup things that are going to hold it for the next couple of minutes or something. But for some organizations, you may need to carry most, if not all of the load on a battery until the backup generator can pick it up. I was visiting a customer that had 3 of the most sophisticated, complicated machine tools I've ever seen. It was 27 spindle, 5 axes machines, each one several $million. If the power went down, they broke all the tools, and basically each machine would cost about $30,000 just to, replace the tools and everything else. So John, if I need to size a battery for essentially ride through, how quickly does a Cummins natural gas generator, go from, I'll call it cold start up to being able to handle full load?
Yeah, sure. So in that application, usually you have a little bit of a delay to make sure there is an outage. So there's a couple seconds there, maybe 3, where you purposely don't start the generator so you can ensure there is a true outage. And then you start the gen, give it a start command, and within about 7 seconds, it's ready to accept load. And
I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry to interrupt. I got to make sure I heard that correctly. Did you say 7 seconds?
yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and at that point, I mean, technically you can accept a full load transition, and the generator will stay online and respond. But if you have a battery in the system, it certainly would be advisable to do a ramp load scenario where you slowly ramp the load over, but still within a minute would be a very conservative number.
Oh, that's fantastic, John. So, I could be completely resilient with ride through with a natural gas generator and what would be relatively a small battery. It only have to last for maybe a couple of minutes, assuming like the natural gas generator picked up and had to restart it or something like that. So just a couple of minutes with a battery and I'm really good to go.
Correct.
Oh, fantastic. We have come to the bottom of the hour. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? Dave out there, I think you've been monitoring the chat line.
Yep, we sure do. So we've got a couple of questions. First one is about natural gas generators, so I'll address this one over to John. Are natural gas generators quiet and smoke-free?
Well, quiet is a relative term. With sound attenuation, you can get them absolutely quiet for sure. Just a matter of cost on the enclosure that goes around that engine generator. And then for smoke, the emissions from a natural gas generator is smoke free. I mean, there's obviously an exhaust contribution, but it's clear and you don't see any sort of opaqueness to it.
Great, thank you. And just to remind folks, if you do want to ask a question, please use the chat function. Keep in mind that all the panelists will see your question. Next question was, utilities are investing a lot in batteries. Won't that improve the grid reliability and thus reduce the amount of outages?
That's a great question, and of course we see this all over the United States. The utilities putting in batteries. In general, it won't do much to help the grid's reliability. Let me go back to a statistic I just said. 72% of grid outages are due to extreme weather events, taking down wires, poles, and things like that. I don't care if you've got a battery, that's not going to change the weather. you know, a battery sitting at some substation, if your feeder line off of that substation gets knocked out by a tornado or a hurricane, you're out. It's not going to make any difference. The area will help it potentially is some of the fire risk areas potentially, where, you know, in the heat of the summer, people turn on the air conditioners and the wires get hot, they start to stretch and they droop and they touch trees and cause fires and things like that. Would happen in PJM. If the batteries are strategically located and are large enough so that you don't have to use that line, you could reduce some of that outage. The problem is that those are huge, huge expensive batteries. So it's much better, and then we see this with PJM, with PG&E as well, is most of that they're going to natural gas generators for. So in general, I would say battery investment by the utility is not going to really address the issues that we need to consider when planning our backups.
We just had another question come through the chat function. Can the solar system produce without connection to the grid or without a standby generator operating? I thought inverters needed an external AC source.
That's a little bit of a misnomer. So it's sort of an evolutionary question. It used to be, not too long ago, but a few years ago, that solar inverters could not island, meaning if the grid goes down and it needs to be synchronized and all those things, that an inverter would not be able to operate. And this was a real, you know, value reduction in having solar, right? You know, especially, you know, you're there during the day, the sun's shining and the grid's down, why can't you do something? So modern inverters almost exclusively today are able to island and reconnect when the grid comes up safely.
Great. Next question is there a website or a spreadsheet I can download where I can input my organization's specific needs and inputs to see what the cost and confidence level would be for a battery versus a generator?
So that's a great idea. The answer is not yet. Exergy, in its support of customers, and so many people ask us about batteries, we will be providing a sort of a website function where you could upload your interval data. That's your load data, you know, that from every 15 minutes. Essentially, you get it in an Excel sheet from your utility. You send that to us. You send us your price, your tariff, and things like that. And we'll come back to you and give you that analysis. It's not up and running yet, but please stay tuned. And that's a great question. Thank you.
Next one is just to remind people, if you do have a question, please put it in through the chat function. Well, this is getting back to next week. Can you get a battery for free like a generator, as you discussed in your last webinar?
Avoiding foreshadowing the answer and doing, so spoiler alert, not going to tell you. But we do have a webinar next week, says how to get a free backup generator.
No, how to get a free backup battery, I believe you mean.
I'm sorry, how to get a free battery. Not just backup battery, how to get a free battery. Because essentially next week's webinar goes through the Swiss Army knife. So if you're interested, please attend, but I don't want to do a spoiler on this one.
Great, that seems to exhaust the questions that we've received. I'll give it another moment to see if any more questions come in. But my thanks to everyone in the meantime.
Again, big shout out thanks to John Rodriguez from Cummings. Really appreciate your input and sort of keeping me honest and stuff. Chet Lyons from Energy Storage Development Partners, thank you so much. I really appreciate the education on pricing and what is a good planning number. Everyone, thank you again. This is Exergy Energy. You want to be green, resilient, and save money. We're a simple, easy to use platform. You just subscribe to our service. We take care of all of it, and you'll actually save more money with us because we've automated all the process. Hope to see you next week. And please have a great holiday weekend. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. The call will be disconnecting now.